when two 11-year-old kids explore the edges of string theory and artificial intelligence. When my eldest son, Shaun, turned 11, he was fascinated by quantum mechanics and string theory. Because of his interest, he decided to create a little visual book about the structure of atoms and their constituent parts, entitled, "Is the Universe Really Made of Tiny Rubber Bands?" A Kid's Guide to String Theory. To his great surprise and ours, the small book and the film based upon it became a huge success, eventually becoming the most popular, downloadable free book on Apple's iBooks for several years. My youngest son, Kelly, followed in his older brother's footsteps. When he turned 11, his keen focus was on the future of computers and artificial intelligence. He too decided to write a little visual book on the subject. He titled his text, "When Computers Become Human, A Kid's Guide to Artificial Intelligence." We had no idea when it was first published in Europe on the Integral World website that it would capture the attention of one of the largest publishing houses in China, which bought the translation rights to the book and offered Kelly a nice cash advance, since they wanted the book to be published in Mandarin. Well, my sons have grown up a bit in the intervening years. My son Shaun graduated from UC Berkeley in computer science a couple of years ago, and after doing an intern at Amazon is currently traveling the world developing a new company with his friends at Stanford, specializing on travel and how to derive the best bang for your buck. Kelly, again following in the footsteps of his brother, is currently a junior at UC Berkeley studying philosophy with an emphasis on cognitive science and artificial intelligence. The following two little videos are narrated by my sons when they were 11 years old. I must confess I miss those days when they were at home, and I could learn from their ever-inquisitive minds. I still learn from them both today, and I am thankful that they help me in understanding the very latest developments in virtual reality and more. And I am endlessly grateful to witness their journey, from young dreamers to pioneers of tomorrow. I hope you enjoy the two following video presentations.
Hi, my name is Shaun. However, my parents' pet name for me is Play-Doh. I've always wondered about the origin of matter. Once I took an old golf ball and broke it apart. I was surprised to see that there were tightly woven rubber bands inside. This got me to thinking about what made up rubber bands. So I went to my father and mother and they suggested that I look into the subject of physics, but more specifically into the subject of quantum mechanics, which is the study of how very small things behave. Richard Feynman, a very famous scientist who worked on developing the first atom bomb, was once asked if he could try to explain all of physics in one simple sentence. His reply was pretty funny but quite profound. Things are made of littler things that jiggle. So if this was true, I thought to myself, then I could unlock the secret of matter by breaking things down into their smaller parts and seeing how they moved around. When I took apart a rubber band, I found out they were comprised of even smaller lines of rubber, but when I went and pulled those apart, all I got were little pieces. I couldn't go any farther with my bare hands, so I got my microscope out, and when I got the piece positioned just right, I could see that it was made of smaller thread-like material. What is that stuff? I pondered. My microscope was pretty limited, so I couldn't break down the rubber much farther. I was stuck in sort of a cul-de-sac, similar to the street I live on, which has a dead end to it. What to do? I then realized I had to learn from the great physicists in the past who have explored this subject in depth. This is when I learned about the early Greek philosopher Democritus, who suggested that all things were made up of little tiny balls which he called atoms, which he thought were uncuttable. This turned out later to be wrong since atoms can be broken apart, but the word atom became a popular way of talking about really tiny things. In the 19th and 20th century, physicists realized that atoms were comprised of mostly empty space, but in their core was a seed-like thing called a nucleus, which houses smaller bits of matter called protons and neutrons, and darting around the nucleus seed was a superfast particle called an electron. I found it intriguing that the number of protons and electrons in an atom are recognized as different chemical elements such as hydrogen, the simplest atom with only one proton and one electron, and uranium, an atom with 92 protons and 92 electrons. These different atomic numbers explain why some things are solid and dense, such as gold, and other things are airy and flighty, such as when you put helium in a balloon. Everything we see around us is just the mixing of different types of atoms. Yet this got me to look farther into the hearts of atoms. What is inside protons and neutrons? What is light? Scientists such as Max Planck, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Max Born, Erwin Schrödinger, Paul Dirac, Wolfgang Pauli, and Werner Heisenberg developed a new way of understanding physics which became popularly known as quantum mechanics. Just as an auto mechanic tries to understand what is wrong with their car by opening up the hood and looking closely at the car's engine, the quantum mechanic looks under the hood of the atom to see how tiny bits of matter are working together. Physicists were shocked to realize that matter at very small scales behaves in completely unexpected ways. Indeed, the more they tried to figure out the exact location and speed of an electron, they noticed that the very act of trying to measure both interfered with the electron. Thus, scientists couldn't know both precisely. Imagine that you're rolling a pair of dice outside in the dark and you couldn't see what numbers you rolled. However, when you put your flashlight on the dice, the light itself changed the roll of the dice so that you couldn't know what your original throw was. Your very act of casting light on the dice literally altered your throw. This is very similar to what happens when physicists try to figure out what electrons are really doing, only to realize that the very act of observing changed what they observed. This understanding caused a revolution in physics, and started them on a new course where chance and probability played an important part in studying the secrets of nature. They realized that there were 4 fundamental forces of the universe. 1. Electromagnetism, which is where we get our light and electricity and our food from. 2. Strong nuclear force. This keeps protons and neutrons bonded together for the most part. 3. Weak nuclear force, which explains why there is radioactive decay within atoms. 4. Gravity, which is the universal attractive force, which explains why the Earth orbits the Sun and why I can't jump very high when I play basketball. But scientists wondered if all 4 of these forces were the result of one very tiny super process. They call this quest a GUT, which stands for Grand Unified Theory, or TOE, a theory of everything. This made me laugh, thinking that the hidden mystery of the universe wasn't a TOE or a GUT. Scientists realized that to find out hidden parts of atoms, they had to investigate even smaller bits. Well, in order to do this, they had to force protons to break apart so they could see what they contained. So scientists built big colliders where they had protons zipping around near the speed of light in a large circular track until they hit each other and broke apart. This reminded me of when I would occasionally take a shell or rock at the beach and try to open it apart and see what's inside of it. The secret of the universe is in the tiniest bits of matter. In the 1980s, a new theory was developed called string theory, which essentially claims that everything in the universe is made out of very small loops of matter, much smaller than anything we can see in atoms. These strings vibrate in various ways and thus cause various forms of matter to emerge. All the elementary particles that make up our universe are like musical notes, which are caused by infinitesimally small loops of guitar-like string, sometimes open and sometimes closed. Strike a different vibration of one of these strings and a different physical property emerges. These strings, however, are so small that nobody can see them, not even with the world's most powerful microscope. This is why scientists built a Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, which is pretty deep underground, so they could smash protons against each other and try to recreate the initial conditions shortly after the Big Bang. The Big Bang is when our universe started 13.7 billion years ago. Everything back then was collapsed into a tiny little seed, including all the stars and all the planets. The single point was much smaller than a penny, but it was amazingly heavy with all that packed energy and matter, so when it exploded it was called a Big Bang. In this way, scientists realized that if they could understand the very small, they could also unlock the secrets of the very large, since at the beginning of time, everything came from the tiniest of seeds. One of the most interesting aspects of string theory is that there may be more dimensions than we presently see. We know the 4 dimensions: length, width, depth, and time, but string theory says that there may be 11 dimensions which are carved up so small that we can't access them. I couldn't visualize this at all, but Barnum Green, the famous professor of physics at Columbia University, in a film series gave a good illustration of it. He pointed to a lawn and said that if you were an ant, the blades of grass would seem like trees. but if you want an airplane looking down at the same one, it would look flat and dimensionless. One of the coolest ideas being suggested by science is that the universe we live in may be only one of trillions of other universes. They have called this the multiverse. Apparently, all of these universes may result from slight changes in vibrations of the extraordinarily tiny strings of energy or matter, just as a few chord changes can produce a new song. The problem with string theory is that it hasn't been yet proven by science. However, scientists have proposed a number of experiments, including some connected to the Large Hadron Collider, which will be able to demonstrate whether string theory is true or not. Because string theory is open to being tested, it is not simply philosophy or wishful thinking. I never realized that a simple golf ball when broken down could be so complex when it's viewed from smaller and smaller scales. My dad suggested that a quote from the poet Tennyson actually summarizes my project perfectly. If we could but understand a single flower, we would know who we are and what the world is. I found it amusing when I thought of how my golf ball was made of smaller rubber bands, which when squished up appeared solid. This got me to thinking about string theory in a different way. Maybe the universe, like my golf ball, is really just made of tiny rubber bands that we cannot see.
Hi, my name is Kelly. However, my parents' pet name for me is Nietzsche. I have always loved computers. One day, my father told me a funny story about how back in the early 2000s, one of his computers came with an Einstein-like animated assistant who would pop up whenever you had a question. My father used to trick my oldest brother, Shaun, who was only 3 at the time, that it was a real person living inside the screen. This got me thinking. Is it possible for a computer to actually become human-like? As I pondered this and other related questions, such as, can a smartphone become self-aware? I realized that I needed to know more about the history of computing and programming. I was surprised to learn that the very first digital computer was our own hands. You can count with them, remember things, and so much more. Although our hands are quite useful, they are limited. Thus, over 4,000 years ago, it appears the Sumerians developed an abacus. This is a counting device. It became popular among the Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, and Chinese. Great thinkers like Panini from India and Archimedes from Greece developed grammar and mathematical rules to better comprehend recursions, which is where a particular thing is defined in terms of itself. Historians believe that the Antikythera mechanism was the first analog computer. It was first discovered off a Greek island in the early 1900s and is believed to date back more than 2,000 years. Centuries later, Islamic astronomers further refined a fantastic tool to help in measuring celestial bodies, in which, in turn, allowed sailors to better navigate when the ocean was calm. It is known as an astrolabe, which was first invented by Hipparchus around 200 BCE. However, it was not until the 19th century that Charles Babbage created what is now known today as the first modern computer, an analytic engine. Sadly, his brilliant design wasn't built during his lifetime. Working with Babbage was the remarkable Ada Lovelace, daughter of Lord Byron, the famous Romantic poet, who may be rightly called the first computer programmer. Perhaps the most famous father of modern-day computing is Alan Turing, who wrote a famous paper in 1936 on computable numbers. This led to the idea of a universal machine where potentially any mathematical problem could be solved. Less well-known, but a vital link in the history of computation, is mathematician-engineer Claude Shannon, who is the chief architect behind information theory and digital circuit design. One of the very first all-purpose electronic computers was made in 1946 and showcased at the University of Pennsylvania. It was called ENIAC. After World War II, there have been remarkable advances in computer technology, including the invention of the microprocessor in the late 1960s, which led to the evolution of microcomputers. By the 1980s, personal computers became a viable option for consumers. They allowed individuals to do all sorts of amazing things that were not possible before, including word processing and electronic mail. However, what really transformed computers was the advent of the Internet that evolved from the United States Department of Defense's ARPANET. The Internet connects individual computing devices throughout the world electronically. It may be likened to a massive global brain that allows for super-fast communication between local and distant peoples and lands. Upon the Internet can be laid all sorts of applications. Perhaps the most significant and powerful app is the World Wide Web, which was advanced by Tim Berners-Lee while working at CERN in Switzerland in 1989, working on a Steve Jobs-inspired computer called NeXT. The Internet and the web utilize hypertext, which allows one to navigate from one link to another seamlessly. Jorge Borges, the erudite writer from Argentina, is often credited with envisioning a fictional form of hypertext in a short story, The Garden of Forking Paths, as far back as 1941. Today, many people around the world have a computer, usually a smartphone that they carry around with them wherever they go. One survey estimated that teenagers check their cell phones at least 150 times a day. We've all become very attached to our computational devices. In fact, most of us won't leave home without some electronic device that is connected to the Internet in the multiplicity of apps. The amount of information that we can now access is so vast that it is almost impossible to imagine. We don't even need to store books, films, or other data because of cloud computing. The term cloud computing describes how anyone with an internet-connected gadget can access data, text, images, or movies that is stored on massive servers positioned around the world. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft have lots of servers. With so much computing power, which appears to grow exponentially year by year, it can allow for programmers to create incredibly lifelike simulations of the real world. Gamers are acutely aware of how much more realistic their games have become since the 1980s, even on cheaper devices. Indeed, we now live at a time where it is becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish what is real and what is artificial. This illusion as reality became clearer to me when I put on the virtual reality headset Oculus Rift. Right from the beginning, even with the tutorial, I felt immersed into another world. Dinosaurs came alive and can even walk right over and breathe onto your face. My mom got so scared of the animal, fake as it was, that she immediately took off the headset and said, "Wow, that is way too real." With virtual reality becoming better each year, it got me thinking about what the future of computation holds for us. Will we live in self-created worlds? Will artificial intelligence become too powerful to control? Will computers become human-like? To better answer these questions, I turned to great thinkers in science, such as Max Tegmark, Stephen Hawking, Ray Kurzweil, and Elon Musk. The first thing I focused on was Ray Kurzweil's idea about the law of accelerating returns and how it applies to the future of technology. One of the ways to envision how this law works is to imagine placing a piece of candy, let's use 2 M&Ms for example, and placing it on the first square of a game board that has 15 other squares. Now for each square after the first, you double the amount of M&Ms. What is astounding is how quickly the amount of M&Ms increase. At 16 squares, you have 64,536 pieces of candy. Now if you have 300 spaces and are doing the same doubling on each square, the number of M&Ms is beyond imagination. Or, put another way, by the time you've reached the 300th square, you could replace every atom in the universe with a piece of M&M candy. What this means when applied to technology is obvious, since every year, if not months, digital devices get more powerful and cheaper. The smartphone in our pocket is 1,000 times more capable than all the NASA computers that got the first man on the moon back in 1969. We've become addicted to an array of digital devices. Scanning information moment to moment has become our addiction. Neil Postman, the acerbic media critic, has long argued that we have been swallowed whole by technology, where the newest gadget is given higher priority than real human interaction. We have become attached to the interactive display screen and less with the person across from us. Stephen Hawking, the famous Cambridge astrophysicist, is scared of the potential danger of artificial intelligence since it could become too powerful to control. As Hawking argued, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate, he said. Humans who are limited by slow biological evolution couldn't compete and would be superseded. The fear of AI and what it might portend has become the touchstone of our age. Books and movies focusing on the consequences of runaway synthetic intelligence have become a mainstay, including Dan Brown's latest novel, Origin, where a computer scientist comes to realize that humans and machines will in just 30 years become one and the same. The question that confronts us now is this: will AI usher in a better or worse world for us? In the late 1960s, after Stanley Kubrick's movie 2001: A Space Odyssey was released, my grandfather Warren, a highly educated lawyer well-trained in mathematics and the sciences, categorically told my dad that a computer, no matter how advanced, will never beat a grandmaster in chess. Well, my grandfather was wrong. Just 3 decades later, an IBM computer poetically named Deep Blue beat the premier chess master in the world, Garry Kasparov. This past year, AlphaGo, a sophisticated computer program developed by Google's DeepMind, beat 18-time world champion Lee Sedol at the extraordinary complex game Go. This was an unexpected outcome since many scientists predicted it would take another 5 or 10 years for a computer to achieve such mastery. But the most shocking news to rock the AI community happened when it was announced that a new version of AlphaGo Zero beat its predecessor in head-to-head Go competition, a mind-boggling 100-0. The implications of this development cannot be understated since the law of accelerating returns allows synthetic intelligence to grow at an exponential rate. Given what AlphaGo has been able to accomplish in such a short period of time, it gives one pause since we may be on the threshold of advancing algorithms that are far beyond our ability to either understand or control them. As David Meyer for Fortune magazine opined, while it sounds like some sort of soda, AlphaGo Zero may represent as much of a breakthrough as its predecessor, since it could presage the development of algorithms with skills that humans do not have. Those very last 8 words, algorithms with skills that humans do not have, should give us a deep pause, if not a ponderous shudder. As Nick Bostrom would say, far from being the smartest possible biological species, we are probably better thought of as the stupidest possible biological species capable of starting a technological civilization. Today, we interact with voice-activated devices such as Amazon's Echo and Apple's iPhone. We even give the intelligent assistants personal names, such as Alexa or Siri. What will happen when these programs become so lifelike that they know us more intimately than any of our family or friends? What happens, in sum, when we cannot tell the difference between a human being and an AI? The relationship we have with technology is becoming ever more intimate, such that we spend more time with computers than with humans. Our computers are becoming us, and in the world of tomorrow, we may have difficulty knowing whether we are speaking with a humanoid or an android. Alan Turing, back in 1950, proposed a test that became well known as the imitation game. Simply put, by only using a series of written exchanges, one attempts to determine whether the person hiding behind a screen is a human being or merely a machine. If computers in the future will easily trick us into believing that they are like us, does it mean that they too have self-awareness? Do they too also possess consciousness? The answer to those questions appears to be directly connected to how our own brains produce subjective awareness. If we could properly understand how a complex net of 86 billion neurons within our craniums creates consciousness, then we would have a potential model for reconstructing something similar in a machine. If consciousness can be mathematically explained in terms of a complex informational system, then it is substrate independent. This means that self-awareness is not dependent on any particular biological material, but can be reconstructed using artificial chips. The implications for this, if true, are profound, since in the future we can endow almost anything with subjective awareness. We are at a crossroad in human existence, since we are giving birth to a new species of artificially intelligent machines that may wholly transcend our ability to control or understand them. Yet it may be that such doomsday prophecies are mistaken, and that in the future we will evolve symbiotically in mutually beneficial ways with technology. It is fascinating to reflect that the very first computer prototype was our own hands, and from those fingers and our enlarged brain, we have created a digital future that is beyond our wildest imaginations. The deeper issue that confronts us now is this: will the world of tomorrow be a utopian-like paradise where technology benefits humankind, or will AI turn out to be a nightmare from which we cannot awake?